Welcome to this evening's talk, which is about yoga for pain management. The principles of this talk will apply to all forms of arthritis, to all forms of autoimmune disease that cause pain, and indeed to chronic pain itself. But we are going to focus a little bit more on arthritis and lupus. So yes, I am a rheumatologist, but today I'm really coming to you as a yoga teacher, and it is a great passion of mine to bring together both of these worlds. I specialize in helping people who've got musculoskeletal, spine, arthritic or autoimmune issues with yoga to get on top of their health issues. I'm going to define what yoga is, just so we can be clear about what we mean by yoga, and maybe bust a few myths about what yoga entails. We'll touch on the physiology of pain in relation to yoga. And of course, we'll look at some of the evidence of how yoga is effective in pain management, specifically with regards to arthritis and lupus. And then we'll pause our slides and spend about 15 minutes going through a guided relaxation practice. And I really do invite you to stay and join in that, as it will be, I hope for you, a yummy, delicious, relaxing time. And then to wrap things up, there should be enough time for any questions or discussion that is generated. So let's start with the basics. Take a moment now and just visualize what you think of when I ask you to think of a person doing yoga. What does that person look like? How old are they? What are they doing with their body? I would hazard a guess that most of us imagine a person doing yoga to be fairly young, fairly athletic, bendy and flexible, probably a woman. However, yoga definitely is not just that. Yoga is thousands of years old, and it evolved as a system of healing and healthcare in its own right. And in yoga, it posits that you are a unique and a holistic, interconnected being. So it really brings to the fore the idea of whole person health. In yoga, it was recognized thousands of years ago that for optimal health, we really do need to consider both the mind and the body. So the idea is that our emotional and our mental well-being will influence our physical symptoms and our physical dis-ease. And likewise, our physical dis-ease will influence our mental and emotional well-being, so that you don't separate the two. You look at the whole person when you are trying to help with either symptoms or disease. And there's really far more to yoga than just the physical postures, or what we call asana in the Sanskrit name. Sanskrit is a very ancient Indian language, which is what much of the yogic books were written in. You don't need to worry too much about the names, but this is really just for your information. However, there's more to yoga than the physical. So you could be lying in bed, not moving an arm or a leg, and doing yoga. And that's because in yoga, the most important aspect is the breath. We are really focusing on connecting the mind, the body, and breath. So this is wonderful, particularly if you do have arthritis or lupus, because if you have a flare, you may not want to move your body, or you may not find it easy to move your body and go and do physical yoga. But you can still derive huge benefits by focusing on the non-physical aspect, which I'm going to break down for you. So there are actually 8 elements in yoga, and this summarizes those 8 elements, or what we call the 8 limbs of yoga. And again, you don't need to get too bogged down in the different names for these things. However, hopefully you will see my arrow cursor drawing your attention to asana, which is the physical posture. For the purpose of today's talk, I'm going to draw your attention to these 4 starred areas on this side of the diagram. Now, in pain management with yoga, it begins with turning our attention inwards. So we want to remove external distraction and turn our gaze inwards and become quite introspective. When we do that, we withdraw our senses, we become more focused on our breath, and from there we can move into more of a meditative state and perhaps even encourage mindfulness and concentration on one thing at a time. And I think we all need that, regardless of whether we've got arthritis or lupus or not, because we live in a very overstimulated, busy world. It's pretty rare that we do one thing at a time these days. We're usually listening to music, reading a book, tending to children, cooking dinner, driving a car, and doing multiple things simultaneously. And actually, what the ancient yogis knew is that we really need to do one thing at a time. And yoga helps us do that. Modern physiology now shows the benefits in pain. So we'll talk about the pain science shortly. What is pain? This is the formal definition of what pain is. It's an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage or described in terms of such damage. But this is my preferred definition of pain, and I think it is more helpful to help us understand the complex aspects of pain. The bottom line is that chronic pain is never really due to one single thing. There are usually multiple other factors contributing towards a person's pain perception. So pain is a biopsychosocial, consciously lived experience, which is influenced by every aspect of our lives. And that's a beautiful quote from this book, which I encourage you to have a look at if you're interested in yoga and pain science. But essentially, this theory posits that our families, the way we're brought up, the systems we live in, the culture we're from, all of this influences how we perceive pain. Our immune systems, our hormonal systems, and very importantly, our nervous system, which we're going to unpack in this talk, are all important for pain. So pain isn't really commonly due to one issue, as I mentioned. So to illustrate that, in my rheumatology clinic, I might see a person who's got quite advanced bony osteoarthritis changes on their imaging, on their x-rays or their scans. But yet the person does not have too much functional impact and they don't have too much pain, and they're still able to walk and to wait there. And in contrast, I might then see a patient who's got severe pain and it's widespread and it's particularly bad in the knee. But when I do imaging of the knee, I don't find too much structurally wrong with the tissues or with the bone. Now that person's pain is real. So what is causing it? And I think this model really helps us to understand why pain can be felt to be more severe and how it varies from person to person, even without tissue damage. The autonomic nervous system is well established now as playing an essential role in pain, and particularly the role of autonomic nervous system dysregulation. So the autonomic nervous system is broadly divided into two areas. You've got your sympathetic nervous system, which is what we more commonly call the fight or flight nervous system. And that's basically important for survival. That will give us the energy to mobilize when something occurs, when there's a threat to life or there's an imminent threat that we perceive. So an example might be that if you're driving along in your car and somebody suddenly walks in front of the road, you will have lots of unconscious reflex mechanisms that will cause you to press your foot on the brake pedal and bring the car to a halt as fast as you can. And at the same time, there'll be that surge of stress hormones that will flood around your body, make your heart rate go high, make your breath get high, your breathing rate get high, and maybe even you'll be trembling and you'll feel all sorts of feelings inside your body. And in contrast, the parasympathetic nervous system is the rest, digest, and heal and repair aspect of our nervous system. And this functions more to bring that sympathetic state into balance. So it's more of a homeostatic mechanism. The parasympathetic nervous system really is what we need in order to maintain balance. So taking the car example, after you've brought your car to a sudden halt and you realize that you are safe and not injured, and the other person is safe and not injured, at that point, your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in to begin to lower your heart rate, to begin to lower your breathing rate, and to reduce the levels of circulating cortisol and adrenaline, all of these stress hormones. Because if you just stayed in that alert threat state, that obviously wouldn't be helpful for you. So that's the balance mechanism of the autonomic nervous system. And it does provide global communication between the brain and the internal organs, including the hormonal system and the immune system. And it is really the key to self-regulation and to resilience. Now, unfortunately, we know that in chronic pain conditions like arthritis and lupus, there are generally degrees of autonomic dysregulation. So we know that persistent stress, that high cortisol state, leaves us in sympathetic overdrive, which means we're primed for threat all of the time. That means our body is easily triggered to feel pain because the body intrinsically feels unsafe. We also get reduced proprioception, so that is the awareness of your body in space, and we get increased pain intensity. And all of this has been borne out by previous studies. We also understand the role of the vagus nerve within the autonomic nervous system and how important that is with pain modulation. So the vagus nerve is sometimes called the wandering nerve, and it wanders from the brain down to our internal organs, including our hormonal organs. And it's mainly a sensory nerve. So it's taking information from our organs, from our body up to the brain. And the brain is then processing that and coming up with the output. So the output might be that the body is safe or the body is unsafe. The body is comfortable or the body is in pain. The body and the emotions feel calm or the emotions feel anxious. So the vagus nerve has an important role in pain modulation and interoception, which I'll touch on in a second. And we know that the vagus nerve activity can be impaired in rheumatological conditions. Interoception is something really exciting and something I think everyone who's got arthritis or pain or lupus should be aware of. It's sometimes referred to as the sixth sense, or maybe even the muscle of awareness, but it's not a muscle. Interoception is the ability to identify sensation and emotional state within the body. It's basically a felt sense of what's going on inside of you and the ability to properly determine what those feelings mean. So, for example, take a moment, rest your hands on your lap, and just see if you can be aware of your heart beating. And some of us will be able to sense our heart beating without placing our hands on our chest. Some of us will need the tactile stimulus of putting our hand over our heart to feel our heartbeat. And some of us, even with the hand placed there, will not feel the heartbeat. All of that represents the fact that each person has different levels of interoceptive awareness. Another example might be the ability to detect hunger cues. So can you sense when you feel hungry? If you can imagine that if you have difficulty sensing digestive signals, you might eat too much or too little. And again, if you have difficulty sensing pain signals, that will cause issues with your general pain sensitivity. Low interoceptive awareness correlates with higher levels of pain sensitivity and with chronic pain and with symptom severity. But the good news is that interoception is like a muscle that you work out in the gym. You can build it. You can improve your ability to interocept, or your interoceptive awareness. How might yoga reduce pain? These are some of the proposed mechanisms. So yoga has a positive effect on the vagus nerve and the autonomic nervous system. And this is particularly seen when we practice slow, rhythmic breathing. So ideally around 6 breaths per minute. When we do that, we get increased heart rate variability and increased vagal tone. And that will reduce the sympathetic nervous system activity and shift our body into that rest, digest, heal, and repair state. So some of the yogic practices that help us achieve that, I've highlighted here for you. And that would include certain breathing techniques, certain pranayamas, we call them, or meditation, or somatic practices, and yoga nidra. And yoga nidra is what you're going to experience in about 10 minutes or so. Another mechanism for yoga to help pain is by improving interoception. So as we mentioned, interoception is our internal body awareness. And yoga encourages positive body awareness. It does improve interoception. It improves our sensory awareness, our ability to self-regulate. It also increases our pain tolerance. And it reduces the anxiety and the distress that we can feel when we have pain. Overall, therefore, if we have enhanced interoception and we have arthritis or lupus or any other autoimmune condition, that might mean that we can become better attuned to sensing when a flare is developing. And then we can take some steps earlier to minimize that flare or to seek medical help. So taking the example of lupus, very often when lupus is flaring, the symptoms can feel quite vague. There can be a general sense of flu-like symptoms, increased fatigue, headaches, muscle pains, and those signals are easy to miss. But when you practice interoception, when you've encouraged that interoceptive muscle, you might be able to tune into those signals early on and maybe take some steps. Maybe you start to rest the body a bit more. Maybe you alter what you're eating in your diet. Maybe you take special attention and make sure you take your medications, but you will do what you need to do to try to minimize flare. Or come and see someone like me. So a further mechanism that yoga can help with arthritis and lupus pain is because it does reduce inflammatory proteins. So studies have shown that yoga can reduce the level of inflammatory cytokines. So cytokines are basically proteins that will drive the inflammatory cascade. And there are certain cytokines like interleukin-6 and TNF-alpha, which some of you may be familiar with, because if you have rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis, or you have Still's disease, for example, you might be taking biological medications that block interleukin-6 or that block TNF-alpha. And that's how it helps your immune system. That's how it helps your symptoms and your condition. So isn't it remarkable that yoga has also been shown to reduce the level of those inflammatory cytokines within the blood? And it can also reduce the level of cortisol, the stress hormone that is going around the body. Very exciting. So what does the evidence say? What does the literature say? Now, the literature is probably somewhat more of a gray area specific to arthritis and to lupus. There is a lot of published literature on yoga in general. We know that yoga can help with anxiety, with improving your sleep, with reducing blood pressure, improving your heart health. We know it helps with mood disturbance like depression, and we know it helps with chronic pain in general. But specific papers on arthritis and lupus, perhaps we don't have as much literature. And that's largely because it's quite challenging to do good quality studies involving yoga. So if you think about the medication that you might take for your arthritis or your lupus, that medication has probably been tested by a pharmaceutical company with thousands of patients, big numbers of people. But in yoga, our studies are a lot smaller. They're usually more in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe the hundreds, but certainly not in the thousands. And it's also difficult to standardize yoga because there is no such thing as one type of yoga. Every yoga practice is different. But nonetheless, we do have some published studies, and on the whole, it's a very positive signal for yoga in benefiting pain if you have arthritis and lupus. So most of the studies have been done with rheumatoid arthritis and with osteoarthritis. And there are various meta-analyses and systematic reviews. And that basically means that the authors have reviewed lots of different papers, put them together to extract the relevant conclusions and to ensure that those papers meet a certain level of quality. And we know that there is a positive effect for pain reduction, particularly with rheumatoid arthritis, but also seen in osteo. There was one trial that saw reduction in pain for people with gout and even reducing serum uric acid. Lupus, there's only been one published study, and it does have generally a positive signal. And all of these studies have established that yoga is safe if you have a rheumatic condition. If you want to derive benefits, how long are you going to need to practice? Well, I guess it's like going to the gym. If we want to suddenly get fit or lose weight, it isn't going to happen within the first week or the first month of doing whatever lifestyle change we're doing. And yoga is the same. The longer you practice, the more you make yoga a part of your routine life, the more benefits you see. In the published research studies, the participants took part in yoga programs that lasted at a minimum 2 months, usually 3 months. And they were doing yoga at least once a week, but in some cases it was daily. And again, you don't have to practice yoga for long periods of time. You can get benefits from short, regular practices on a consistent basis. So the take-home points from this are to recognize the importance of the mind-body connection if you live with arthritis or chronic pain or lupus, or indeed any autoimmune condition. The evidence is growing for the benefits of yoga in reducing pain in arthritis, and it is well established in regulating the nervous system. It shifts us from the sympathetic stress response into the rest, digest, heal, and repair state. Yoga enhances our internal awareness and it increases our pain tolerance, and it reduces the level of circulating inflammatory markers and molecules. Regular practice gives us the greatest effects. Before we move to our guided practice, just a brief mention that you may want to talk to me if you have specific questions and you feel too shy to ask today. But please do get in contact. I'd love to hear from you. We'll turn our attention now to a guided practice. And this will be perhaps a 15-minute taster of what a yoga nidra feels like. And after we've completed this, there'll be time for us to have a discussion, and I welcome any questions that you have. So for this practice, I really do invite you to participate. Get comfortable. Create a little nidra nest. Lie down. Support your head or your back with pillows. Maybe grab some blankets. And really come to a space where you can switch off from the outside world and just listen to my voice for about 15 minutes. And you can lie in bed, you can lie on your sofa or anywhere else. Of course, you can stay seated. Just make sure that you're comfortable as you sit. I'll give you a moment to do that. And then we will begin. Yoga Nidra, if you're not familiar, is a state of yogic sleep. So the idea is to walk you through a guided meditation, which will take you into a state of deep rest, that parasympathetic state that we talked about. And it's really been brought to the fore recently by people like Andrew Huberman, who calls Yoga Nidra non-sleep deep rest. It's essentially the same thing. And Yoga Nidra practices can last anywhere from 10 minutes all the way up to 2 hours, depending on how much you want to do. So today we will do a 15-minute Nidra practice. So come to your comfortable space. Welcome to your Yoga Nidra. This is your time to rest and to be nourished. Take your time now to ensure that you are resting comfortably. A comfortable position where you can relax, where your body can feel supported, where you are rested, where you are held. Take as long as you need to do this now. Let your eyes close, or let your eyelids be heavy. Let the light drift away from your eyes. And as we're resting now, we'll begin this practice of Yoga Nidra. Bring your awareness to your breath. If you like, perhaps you inhale through your nose, allowing the whole belly to expand, and exhale through your mouth with a sigh, relaxing the whole body. Inhale through your nose. Create space. Exhale and soften. Bring your awareness to the crown of your head, visualizing golden, bright light above the crown of your head. This golden, bright light, full of energy, vitality, life, which can nourish and heal every part of you that it touches. And as we explore different points of the body now, imagine this golden, bright light entering your body, healing and restoring everything that it touches. Sensing now the crown of your head, bringing your awareness to the crown of your head, softening through the muscles of your scalp and your face, moving down into the space between your brows, your eyes, jaw, cheeks, chin, mouth, and throat. From the throat down into your collarbone. Golden bright light moves around into the back of your neck, from the back of your neck into your shoulders, top of your right shoulder, moving down your right arm, right elbow, right forearm, right wrist, right palm, and the fingers. Moving your awareness back up through your wrist, right elbow, right arm, top of your right shoulder. The golden bright light moves around to the top of your left shoulder now. Moving down your left arm, left elbow, left forearm, left wrist, left palm, and fingers. Sensing the light moving back up your wrist, left elbow, left arm, top of your left shoulder. Golden bright light moves back into your neck now, to the very top of your neck. It begins to descend down your neck, down your spine, moving down through each vertebra, one at a time. The golden light bathes your shoulder blades, your ribs, your chest, your lungs, and your belly. And soften through the side of your body. The light reaches your pelvis, back of your pelvis, base of your spine, into the buttocks, your hips, the front of your pelvis, moving down your legs now, softening through your thighs, down into your knees, front of your knees, back of your knees. The light moves down into your calves, heels, soles of your feet, tops of your feet and your toes, the whole body now. The whole body is golden, bright light. The whole body is resting now. Noticing the rhythm of your breath. Effortless awareness of the rhythm of your breath. No need for you to change anything at all. Simply noticing the rise and fall of your chest. Simply noticing the rise and fall of your belly. Sensing the lightness of your body as you inhale. Sensing the heaviness of your body as you exhale. The whole body is heavy now. Supported. Nourished. Resting now. Your awareness moves back to your body. Your awareness moves back to your body now. Noticing the sounds inside the room. Noticing the sounds around you. Feeling your body sensing your breath, gently moving your fingers and toes, gently moving your fingers and toes, ankles and wrists. Perhaps you stretch your arms overhead. Maybe you yawn or sigh. Slowly opening your eyes and letting the light softly drift back in. Welcome yourself back to the here and now. This practice of Yoga Nidra is now complete.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the webinar. It was really interesting. I've gained so much more insight on yoga and its 8 arms and how it helps in a very holistic way. How do meds such as ibuprofen, etc., affect these yoga benefits?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm not aware of any particular studies that would show how kind of conventional medication would affect the yoga benefits. I mean, ultimately, my view is that yoga is complementary. It is a system of healthcare, but it is complementary to whatever health interventions you take for your arthritis or for your lupus or for your pain. I don't think it has to be either or. I think that things can coexist nicely together. But we do know, from my personal experience, I have seen that people who've got a consistent yoga practice, because of the effects on interoception and the effects on the nervous system, they often don't need as much pain medication. So I think that is a long-term effect of a consistent yoga practice. I'm not saying that you're going to be able to throw away all your pills, but I am saying that it can certainly reduce your pain sensitivity, and you may not need to use as much ibuprofen, for example, as the person mentioned in the question.
Yeah. And we've got another question here. How do you get more yoga nidra? This is my question too. That was amazing.
Thank you. So you can certainly practice with me. So I have a weekly class that I offer online, and we do yoga nidras as part of that. But you can also look on YouTube. I think there's probably quite a few yoga nidras available if you Google and see which one speaks to you. So every yoga nidra will be written in the words of the person who's guiding it. So there are lots of different scripts, if you like, and this is how I like to guide yoga nidra when I work with people or when I teach people in my classes. But it's really worth doing. And I personally think that if you practice a short nidra like that, it doesn't have to be a 60-minute drawn-out practice. We don't all have 60 minutes in the middle of the day to do these things. But if you can take 15 minutes at lunchtime, let's say, or in the middle of the day, to do a practice like nidra or to do a restorative yoga pose for about 15 minutes, I believe that there are strong benefits in terms of pain management and also in fatigue management. I should add, I am building a bank of these practices, so they'll also soon be on YouTube as well.
If we are on steroids, might these yoga practices help us to reduce or get right off steroids? I think you partially answered that before.
Yeah, so it would be a similar answer to what I mentioned earlier. So in theory, yes, if yoga is a very individual journey for each person. So yes, it might be that your autoimmune condition or whatever condition you're taking steroids for goes into a state of remission. It obviously is difficult to prove one way or the other, whether it is your yoga practice that is causing the remission or whether it is the steroids or the other medication. So I don't advocate, suddenly stopping your medication. Always work with your rheumatologist or your specialist. But yes, from an anecdotal perspective, I certainly have seen patients who have been able to come off their steroids or their other medication, and it's difficult for me to say it's purely because they practice yoga. but they do incorporate yoga into every aspect of their life. So I only touched on those 8 limbs of yoga. It's a really complex science, actually, yoga. But when you really get into that world, you will find that it affects every aspect of your lifestyle. So it'll change how you eat, it'll change how you sleep, it'll change how you rest, it'll change how you walk, it'll change how you exercise. So you can imagine that if your entire lifestyle is overhauled, then that will have a bigger impact, a more significant impact on your autoimmune condition. And then you might be able to come down on your medications.
Right. And we do have a few people asking where they can restart yoga. As they're young, or are they a different life stage than when they used to do it when they were younger?
Yeah, I'm in Christchurch. I'm no longer young. Yeah, I feel your pain. I'm no longer young either. So so it doesn't matter what age you are. I mean, we teach children who are 3 years old, and we teach people all the way up to 100, you know, if they want to do it. So there are various forms of yoga. What I would suggest is, if you have been away from yoga for a long time, or you're brand new to yoga, it's a really good idea to start with something like a beginner's yoga program. So, for example, I teach beginners yoga here in Auckland in an Auckland yoga studio, and I make it very clear that whenever I have new students, I want to know about any health issues and health concerns, because I want to make sure that how I teach you, I'm making sure that you have got adaptations and you've got the support to make sure that the yoga works for your body. So that's important. If you are going to go back to a yoga practice after many years away, look to see if there's specific yoga specifically for arthritis, or you can come and have a look at my website and you'll find out some information there too.
Asked, does yoga help in obesity?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, but that's probably not the right reason to go into it. So a lot of people, if you are feeling able to do a very active practice where you're doing the physical poses and you're moving quite quickly, you certainly can burn a lot of calories, so you certainly can lose weight, but it's not really recommended that you sort of go into yoga for that purpose. It's more likely that if you embrace yoga and all of the different tools within it, what happens is, as I mentioned earlier, you start to shift your lifestyle, you start to shift your diet, you start to, make modifications to your nutrition. And as a side effect, that can cause weight loss. It's a good side effect, but it can cause weight loss.
And how can we learn more about interoception?
So you can, I think these slides will be made available, and I've put the references, the resources and the papers on interoception there. We'll get first-hand experience of interoceptive practices. So this is something I didn't talk about, but because yoga is very diverse, a little example would be something like hot yoga or power yoga would be a very strenuous, using your body strength, your body weight, moving at a certain rate, and doing certain poses. And that might not encourage as much interoception as a different type of yoga practice where you're deliberately slowing down and becoming mindful. Because if you think about it, if you're moving fast, whether you're walking or dancing or whatever, you can't be paying attention to what's happening internally. So if you're straining to hold a pose, like in a power yoga class, you're probably not practicing interoception. So I mentioned that because if you want to look up interoception and interoceptive practices, what you want to look for are things like slow flow, mindful flow, nidra, which is what we've just done.
Will this benefit my heart issues as well as the rheumatoid arthritis?
Short answer, yes. Yeah. So yoga is great. It's, again, published evidence, definitely can help with cardiovascular health. As I mentioned, it can it can lower your blood pressure. And I think also if you've got, particular issues like POTS and you've got dysautonomia, there's heart rate regulation issues. So I think yoga can also help with that as well, because it's working on your vagal tone. So yes, short answer.
Asks, is yoga safe for hypermobility with arthritis?
That's a really great question. And it's not black and white. So it depends on what type of yoga you're practicing, and it depends very much on the person who's guiding your yoga practice. So hypermobility is common, isn't it? There's a lot of people who do have a degree of hypermobility, and there are certain forms of yoga which, if you're not aware, or the teacher's not aware that you're hypermobile, you might end up working in too far, extending your range of motion. So when you have hypermobility, the basic principle is that when you practice yoga, it's not about trying to get to your end range of motion, because you'll probably go past your end range of motion because you're so extra flexible. So we're not trying to do that. Again, if you've got hypermobility, yoga is very safe as long as it's practiced with a teacher who's aware of your hypermobility and can cue you effectively. So cue you more into strength building poses rather than range of motion poses. You absolutely can do yoga with hypermobility. You just need to be mindful and make sure your teacher understands what's going on with your body.
And thank you so much, Dr. Nikki, once again for coming online with us and providing our community with so much relevant and practical information that we can take away and start using for pain self-management.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hope to see you all again. Thank you so much for joining in.